Richard Gere entered Hollywood as more than just another handsome face. He arrived as a figure who would come to define modern cinematic romance, while quietly resisting the very machinery that created him. At the height of his fame, he embodied a rare blend of elegance, sensuality, and introspection that made audiences believe in the enduring fantasy of love stories on the big screen. From his breakthrough in the late 1970s to his dominance through the 1980s and 1990s, Gere became synonymous with a certain kind of leading man, confident yet emotionally distant, glamorous yet inwardly searching. His presence in films like American Gigolo, An Officer and a Gentleman, and Pretty Woman didn't just entertain audiences. It shaped cultural ideas of romance, masculinity, and desire. Yet behind the polished image and global fame, Gere was never fully absorbed into the Hollywood system. He often appeared more like a visitor than a resident, someone temporarily passing through the industry while pursuing deeper personal questions about meaning, spirituality, and purpose. This duality, between global stardom and inner detachment, would define both his rise and his later career shifts. As the industry evolved and new types of stars emerged, Gere's classical romantic aura began to feel like a relic of another era. Still, his legacy remained intact, not just as an actor, but as a symbol of a time when movie stardom itself carried an almost mythical weight. Early life and the formation of a restless spirit. Born in Philadelphia in 1949 and raised in Syracuse, New York, Richard Gere grew up in a working-class household shaped by discipline, modesty, and emotional restraint. His father worked in insurance while his mother maintained the home, instilling a sense of stability, but not privilege. From an early age, Gere showed an unusual mix of talents and interests that set him apart from his surroundings. He excelled in gymnastics, earning a scholarship to the University of Massachusetts, yet his intellectual curiosity pulled him toward philosophy, music, and the arts. This combination of physical discipline and inner reflection would become a defining trait throughout his life and career. Unlike many future actors who pursue fame directly, Gere initially seemed uncertain about performance as a path. He explored multiple creative outlets, teaching himself instruments such as the guitar and trumpet, while developing an appreciation for abstract thinking and existential inquiry. Philosophy classes deepened his interest in questions of identity and purpose, planting the seeds of the spiritual path he would later follow. Even in his youth, he carried a quiet intensity, a sense that he was observing the world rather than fully participating in it. Friends and peers often described him as thoughtful and reserved, someone who seemed slightly removed from ordinary ambitions. This early tension between grounded reality and internal exploration would later manifest in his choice of roles and his relationship with fame itself. The stage years and the search for expression. Before Hollywood recognized him, Richard Gere's artistic foundation was built on stage performance and experimentation in New York and London. In the early 1970s, he struggled like many young actors, navigating auditions and small roles while trying to establish a creative identity. Theater became his primary training ground, offering him the freedom to explore emotional depth without the commercial pressures of film. One of his notable early breakthroughs came in stage productions, where his quiet charisma and physical presence stood out even in ensemble casts. During this period, Gere also developed a deeper connection to music and spirituality, often carrying his guitar and immersing himself in artistic communities that valued expression over commercial success. His involvement in the London stage production of Grease, where he played Danny Zuko, hinted at his potential to command attention in leading roles. However, he was not yet a traditional star. His appeal lay in something less definable, an emotional stillness that contrasted with the more expressive acting styles of the time. These formative years shaped his later screen persona. Rather than projecting exaggerated energy, Gere developed a style built on restraint, subtlety, and presence. He learned to communicate emotion through silence and gaze rather than dialogue alone, a trait that would become central to his most iconic performances in cinema. Breakthrough roles and the birth of a screen legend. Richard Gere's transition from promising actor to international star began in the late 1970s with Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. Though not a commercial blockbuster, the film revealed Gere's unique ability to embody characters who existed in emotional ambiguity. His performance was understated yet powerful, marked by quiet intensity and a sense of internal conflict. Critics recognized that he brought something different to the screen, a combination of physical presence and philosophical depth. The real turning point came with American Gigolo in 1980. As Julian Kay, a high-end escort navigating wealth, desire, and emotional isolation, Gere became an icon almost overnight. The film's sleek visual style and Armani wardrobe turned him into a symbol of 1980s sophistication. More than just a performance, it established an entire aesthetic of masculinity that blended sensuality with vulnerability. Following this success, an officer and a gentleman solidified his status as a leading man. The film's emotional climax and romantic narrative elevated Gere into the realm of cinematic myth. He was no longer simply an actor. He had become a cultural image of romance and aspiration. At this stage, Hollywood did not just cast him. It relied on him to embody ideals that audiences wanted to believe in. The 1980s evolution and spiritual detachment. Throughout the 1980s, Richard Gere resisted being confined to a single cinematic identity. While audiences associated him with romance and glamour, he actively pursued diverse roles that challenged expectations. Films such as The Cotton Club and Breathless reflected his interest in stylistic experimentation and character complexity, even when they did not achieve consistent commercial success. At the same time, Gere's personal life took a more introspective turn. He began exploring Buddhism and meditation, developing a spiritual framework that emphasized detachment from material success and ego-driven ambition. This philosophical shift influenced how he approached Hollywood. Rather than aggressively pursuing fame, he often stepped back, choosing projects based on artistic or personal resonance rather than market strategy. This detachment made him unusual within the industry. While many actors of his generation fought to maintain visibility, Gere seemed increasingly comfortable with absence. He was present enough to remain relevant, yet distant enough to avoid complete absorption into celebrity culture. This balance created an aura of mystery around him, reinforcing his image as a man who was both inside and outside of Hollywood at the same time. Pretty Woman and the peak of romantic stardom. The release of Pretty Woman in 1990 marked one of the most defining moments in Richard Gere's career. Paired with Julia Roberts, he played Edward Lewis, a wealthy businessman who unexpectedly falls in love with a woman from a completely different world. The film's fairy tale structure, combined with undeniable chemistry between its leads, turned it into a global phenomenon. For Gere, the role reaffirmed his status as the ultimate romantic lead. The image of him in tailored suits, moving through luxury environments with quiet confidence, became instantly iconic. The film reshaped modern romantic comedy and solidified Gere's association with elegance, emotional depth, and restrained charm. Despite its success, Gere did not become trapped by the role. Instead, he continued seeking variety, demonstrating a reluctance to repeat formulas that guaranteed box office success. However, no matter how diverse his later roles became, Pretty Woman remained a defining reference point in his career, anchoring his legacy in popular culture as one of cinema's most enduring romantic figures. The 1990s, dominance and artistic versatility. The 1990s represented both commercial success and artistic expansion for Richard Gere. During this decade, he delivered performances that showcased his ability to move beyond romance into complex dramatic territory. In Primal Fear, he portrayed a confident defense attorney entangled in psychological manipulation, sharing the screen with Edward Norton in a performance that elevated the film into a critical success. He also revisited romantic territory in Runaway Bride, reuniting with Julia Roberts and reinforcing their on-screen chemistry. Meanwhile, films like Summersby explored darker emotional themes, allowing Gere to portray characters shaped by mystery and moral ambiguity. This range demonstrated that his appeal extended far beyond romantic idealism. Throughout this period, Gere also became a fashion and cultural icon. His association with brands like Armani reinforced his status as a symbol of refined masculinity. Yet even at the height of his popularity, he remained relatively detached from Hollywood's social machinery, avoiding scandal and maintaining a private personal life, marriage, activism, and Hollywood distance. Richard Gere's marriage to supermodel Cindy Crawford in the early 1990s placed him at the center of global media attention. Together, they represented a rare fusion of fashion and film stardom, becoming one of the most photographed couples of the era. However, the relationship eventually ended, and Gere retreated from public discussion of his personal life with characteristic discretion. During this time, his commitment to activism became increasingly prominent. His outspoken support for Tibet and close association with the Dalai Lama positioned him as a politically engaged public figure. While admired by many, these stances reportedly created tension within parts of the industry, particularly due to Hollywood's growing financial ties to international markets. Rather than adjusting his views for career convenience, Gere maintained his position, reinforcing his image as an actor guided by principle rather than strategy. This independence further distanced him from the traditional Hollywood system, even as it strengthened his reputation for integrity and conviction. Chicago, reinvention, and late career recognition. In the early 2000s, Richard Gere experienced another major resurgence with Chicago. Playing Billy Flynn, a charismatic and manipulative lawyer in a stylized musical setting, Gere surprised audiences by showcasing his singing and dancing abilities. The role demonstrated his adaptability and willingness to reinvent himself even after decades in the industry. The film's success, including major award recognition, reaffirmed his place in Hollywood's upper tier. It proved that Gere was not simply a relic of 1980s romantic cinema, but an actor capable of evolving with changing cinematic trends. His performance balanced theatricality with charm, adding yet another dimension to his already diverse career. However, this resurgence also marked a transition point. While still respected and admired, Gere was no longer the central figure of Hollywood's leading man landscape. New generations of actors and shifting industry priorities gradually moved attention elsewhere. Reflection, legacy, and the meaning of absence. As Richard Gere moved into later stages of his career, his presence in mainstream cinema became less frequent, not due to disappearance, but due to transformation. He began prioritizing selective roles, humanitarian work, and personal reflection over constant visibility. This shift reinforced the perception that he was less interested in maintaining stardom than in exploring meaning beyond it. Hollywood, in turn, evolved into a different kind of industry, faster, more commercial, and increasingly driven by new forms of celebrity culture. Within this environment, Gere's classical image of the romantic leading man appeared increasingly rare, yet his influence remained deeply embedded in film history, shaping how audiences understand romance, charisma, and cinematic masculinity. His legacy is not defined by disappearance, but by endurance. Richard Gere remains a figure who represents both the height of Hollywood romantic idealism and the possibility of stepping beyond it. His career reflects a continuous negotiation between visibility and withdrawal, fame and philosophy, performance and inner life.